it's noon on Wednesday, and I decided today to read like one of my favorite books of all time, and it will probably take the whole time. This was also one of my kids, my real kids, that are all grown up now. It was their favorite book when they were growing up, and I read it to my students every year. So my students this year, you guys have heard this already this year. So hopefully you're going, yay, we get to hear the talking eggs again. So this is The Talking Eggs, and it's a Caldecott winner, and it's by Robert D. Souci, and pictures by Jerry Pinkney. And I don't know, they won something else too. It's a great book. You're going to love it. And I told my kids that when I was reading this, the very first time I read it, there's a spot where I went, oh, wait, what? It didn't make sense. And I went back and read it again. And then I realized, it did make sense. It went with the story. And when you're reading, sometimes you have to do that, is like stop and realize, wait a minute, that didn't make sense. Maybe I better go back. So I will show you where that spot was. And you might think, she must have read that wrong. Back in the old days, there was a widow and two daughters named Rose and Blanche. They lived on a farm so poor it looked like the tail end of bad luck. They raised a few chickens, some beans, and a little cotton to get by. Rose, the older sister, was cross and mean and didn't know beans from birds' eggs. Blanche was sweet and kind and sharp as 40 crickets. But their mother liked Rose the best, 'cause they were like two peas in a pod, bad-tempered, sharp-tongued, and always a-putting on airs. The mother made Blanche do all the work around the place. She had to iron the clothes each morning, using an old iron filled with hot coals. Part of real life, huh? String the beans for supper, chop cotton in the afternoon. And while she'd be doing all these chores, her mama and her sister would sit side by side in rocking chairs on the shady porch, fanning themselves and talking foolishness about getting rich and moving to the city where they could go to fancy balls wearing trail-train dresses and lots of jewels. One hot day, the mother sent Blanche to the well to get a bucket of water. When the girl got there, she found an old woman wrapped in a raggedy black shawl, near fainting from the heat. "Please, child, give me a sip of water," the old woman said. "I'm about to die of thirst." "Yes, Auntie," Blanche said, raising the old bucket. And dipping some cool, clean water. "You drink what you need." "Thank you, child," said the old woman when she'd taken swallow after swallow of water. "You got a spirit of do-right in your soul, and God's going to bless you." And then she walked away down the path that led into the deep woods. Now, when Blanche got back to the cabin, her mother and her sister hollered at her for taking so long. "This water's so warm, it's near boiling," shouted Rose, and she dumped the bucket on the porch. "Here your poor sister's near dying for a drop of cool water," her mother screamed, "and you can't even bring her that little thing." Then the two of them scolded and hit Blanche until the frightened girl ran away into the woods. She began to cry since she didn't have anywhere to go and she was too scared to go home. Suddenly, around a bend in the path came the old woman in the raggedy black shawl. When she saw Blanche, she asked kindly, "What's made you cry so, child?" "My mama and my sister Rose lit into me for something that wasn't my fault," said Blanche, rubbing tears off of her cheek. "Now I'm afraid to go home." "Oh, you hush, child, and stop your crying. You gonna come on home with me, and I'll give you supper and a clean bed. But you gots to promise not to laugh at anything you see." Blanche gave her word of honor that she wouldn't laugh. Then the old woman took her by the hand and led her deep into the backwoods. As they walked along the narrow path, bramble bushes and tree branches opened wide in front of them and then closed up behind them. Soon they came to the old woman's tumble-down shack. A cow with 2 heads and horns like corkscrews peered over the fence at Blanche and brayed like a mule. She reckoned it was a pretty strange sight, but she didn't say anything, not wanting to hurt the old woman's feelings. Next, she saw in the yard in front of the cabin that it was filled with chickens of every color. Some were hopping about on 1 leg, and some were running around on 3 or 4 or even more. These chickens didn't cluck, but they whistled like mockingbirds. I'm at school. Some were hopping on 1 leg, some running around 3, 4, or even more. Now these chickens didn't cluck, but they whistled like mockingbirds. But strange as it all was, Blanche stuck to her promise not to laugh. Now when they got inside the cabin, the old woman said, "Light the fire and cook us some supper." So Blanche fetched kindling from the woodpile outside the back door. The old woman sat down near the fireplace and took off her head. That was the spot. That was where I stopped and thought, I couldn't possibly have read that right. She took off her head? Guess what? It really said that. And she took off her head. She set it on her knees like a pumpkin. First, she combed out her gray hair, and then she plaited it into 2 long braids. Blanche got pretty scared at this, but the woman had been nothing but kind to her. So she just went on lighting the fire. After a little bit, the old woman put her head back on her shoulders, looked at herself in the sliver of a mirror that was nailed to the cabin wall. She said, "That's better." Then she gave Blanche an old beef bone and said, "Put this in the pot for supper." Now Blanche was near starving, and the bone looked like a pretty sad meal for the 2 of them, but she did as the old woman asked. "Shall I boil it for soup, Auntie?" she asked. "Look in the pot, child," said the old woman, laughing. The pot was filled with thick stew bubbling away. Next, the old woman gave Blanche 1 grain of rice and told her to grind it in the stone mortar. Now, feeling mighty foolish, Blanche began to pound the grain with the heavy stone pestle. In a moment, the mortar was overflowing with rice. When they had finished their supper, the old woman said, "It's a fine moonshiny night, child. You come on with me." They sat themselves down on the back porch steps. After a time, dozens of rabbits came out from under brush and formed a circle in the yard. The men rabbits had frock-tail coats, and the ladies rabbits had little trail-train dresses. They danced, standing up on their hind legs, hopping about. 1 big rabbit played the banjo, and the old woman hummed on along with it. Blanche kept time by clapping along. The rabbits did a square dance, a Virginia reel, and even a cakewalk. The girl felt so happy she never wanted to leave. She sat and clapped until she fell asleep, and the old woman carried her inside and put her to bed. When Blanche got up the next morning, the old woman told her, "Go milk my cow." The little girl the girl did what she was told, and the 2-headed cow with the curly horns gave her a bucket of the sweetest milk she had ever tasted, and they had it with the morning cocoa. "You got to go home now, child," the old woman said to Blanche, who was washing the breakfast dishes. "But I tell you, things are going to be better from here on out. And since you're such a good girl, I got a present for you. Now you go out in that chicken house, and any eggs that say, take me, you go ahead and take. But any of the eggs that say, don't take me, you leave them be. And then, on your way home, you throw those eggs over your left shoulder so they break in the road behind you. And then you'll get a surprise. When Blanche got to the little chicken house, she found all the nests were just filled up with eggs. Half are gold and silver or covered with jewels, and half looked just like the eggs she got back home. All the plain eggs said, take me, and all the fancy ones said, don't take me. She wished she could take just one of those gold or fancy eggs, but she did as the old woman told her and only scooped up the plain ones. She and the old woman waved goodbye, and then Blanche went on her way. Part way home, she began to toss those eggs one at a time over her left shoulder. All sorts of wonderful things spilled out of those eggs. Now diamonds and rubies, now gold and silver coins, now pretty silk dresses and dainty satin shoes. There was even a handsome carriage that grew in the wink from the size of a matchbox, and a fine brown pony to pull it that had sprouted from the size of a cricket. Blanche loaded all these lovely things into the carriage and rode the rest of the way home like a grand lady. When she got home to the cabin, her mother and her sister just gawked at her new finery. Where'd you get all those things? Her mother asked. Make and Rose helped Blanche carry the treasures inside, and that evening the mother cooked dinner for the first time since Blanche was old enough to hold a skillet, and all the time telling Blanche what a sweet daughter she was. Her mama got the girl to tell her all about the old woman and the cabin in the woods and the talking eggs. When Blanche was asleep, the mother grabbed Rose and told her, you got to go in the woods tomorrow morning and find that old auntie. Then you'll get some of these talking eggs for yourself so you can have fine dresses and jewels like your sister. When you get back, I'll chase Blanche off and keep her things for myself. Then we'll go to the city and be fine ladies like we was meant to be. Can't we just run her off tonight so's I don't have to go poking through the woods looking for some crazy old auntie? Rose whined. There's not near enough here for two, her mother said, getting angry. Now you do as I say, and don't you be so contrary. So, the next morning, Rose set out dragged foot into the woods. She mostly dawdled, but soon she met the old woman in the raggedy black shawl. My sweet little sister Blanche, she told me you got a real pretty house and all, said Rose. I appreciate to see it. You can come along if you have a mind to, said the old woman, but you got to promise not to laugh at whatever you see. Oh, I swear, said Rose. So, oops. You know, that's the thing with live. You never know exactly what's going to happen to you. So, the old woman led her through the bramble bushes and the tree branches into the deep woods. But when they got near the cabin and Rose saw the two-headed cow that bred like a mule and the funny-looking chickens that sang like mockingbirds, she yelled, if there ever was a sight, that's one. That's the stupidest thing in the world. And she laughed and laughed until she nearly fell down. I'm sorry, I can't get it to stay up. Okay, there we go. See, we go into that world, and then all of a sudden, I make it so we come out of that world. So I hope you can get back into the world of the talking eggs. Said the old woman who was shaking her head. Inside, Rose complained when she was asked to start the fire, and she wound up with more smoke than flame. When the old woman gave her an old bone to put in the pot for supper, Rose said crossly, "That's gonna make a mighty poor meal." And she dropped in the pot, but the old bone remained an old bone. And they had only thin soup for supper. When the old woman gave her 1 grain of rice with the stone mortar, Rose said, "That sad speck won't hardly feed a fly," and she wouldn't even lift the pestle. So they had no rice at all. Said the old woman. Rose went to bed hungry, and all night long she heard mice scratching under the floor and screech owls clawing at the windows. In the morning, the old woman told her to milk the cow, and Rose did, but she made so much fun of the old cow that she got nothing but thin, spoiled milk not fit for drinking. So they had their morning cocoa without any cream. When the old woman lifted her head off her shoulders to brush out her hair quick as a wink, Rose grabbed that head and said, "I'm not going to put you back together until you give me presents like my sister had." "Oh, child, you are a wicked girl," the old woman's head said, "but I got to have my body back. So I'll tell you what to do. You go in the chicken house and you take those eggs that say, 'Take me,' but you leave the ones that say, 'Don't take me.' Then you toss those eggs over your right shoulder on your way home." To be sure that the old woman wasn't playing her a trick, Rose set the old woman's head out on the porch while her body sat groping around the cabin. Then she ran out to the chicken house, and inside all the plain eggs were saying, "Take me," while all the gold and silver and jeweled ones said, "Don't take me." "You think I'm fool enough to listen to you and pass up the prettiest ones? Ha! Not on your life." So she grabbed all the gold and silver and jeweled eggs that kept yelling, "Don't take me," and off she ran into the deep woods. As soon as she was out of sight of the old woman's cabin, she tossed those eggs over her right shoulder just as fast as she could. But out of the shells came clouds of whip snakes, toads, frogs, yellow jackets, and a big old gray wolf. These began to chase after her like pigs after a pumpkin. Holler and blood and murder, Rose ran all the way to her mother's cabin. When the woman saw the swarm of things chasing her daughter, she tried to rescue her with a broom. But the wasp and the wolf and all the other creatures, they just wouldn't be chased off. So mother and daughter hightailed it into the woods with all those animals following them. When they returned home, angry and sore and stung and covered in mud, they found that Blanche had gone to the city to live like a grand lady, though she always remained as kind and generous as always. And for the rest of their lives, Rose and her mother tried to find that strange old woman's cabin and the talking eggs, but they never could find that cabin again. The end. So I hope that you enjoyed the talking eggs today. I've gone over my time, but like I said, I hope it has become one of your favorites like it is the favorites in my family. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.